I'm going to go ahead and get rolling. We're going to do things totally different here. Normally we take an offering right now. I think we're going to wait until the end of the service to do that. But we're going to do the State of the Church Address Year 1. And we did one of these back in January, and that was long before most of you were even involved. And I just decided that it would be better to do it on the anniversary date each year. So that's the plan, is on our anniversary date, we're going to talk about where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. And it's just unbelievable what God has done. When we were getting ready to launch a church, I was talking to a lot of pastors, talking to a lot of ministers, saying, how do you do this? Because I was absolutely clueless, and I'm still only a year removed from being absolutely clueless. And so I started just investigating, asking people, how do you launch a church? What do you do? And 3 different people on 3 different occasions, totally unrelated to one another, said these words to me. They said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And they were saying, what you've got to do is just you've got to start putting one foot in front of the other. You've got to start making this decision and that decision and buy this piece of gear and hire this person or talk to this person and get this person in the right position. And it's putting one foot in front of the other. And what happens is eventually you find you've got yourselves a church. And that's kind of what's happened here. Is a year and a half ago, we had 8 people that said we want to start a church in Louisville. And 2 of those people, totally unrelated to each other, said these words to me. The same guys. They said, you'll overestimate what you can accomplish in 1 year, and they said you'll underestimate what can be done in 10 years. So a lot of church planners go in there and they think after a year we're going to have 800 people and it's going to be amazing and we're going to have this massive church. And I had no desire for that to happen. That's totally unmanageable from my perspective. But they did say, just plug away and have realistic expectations, and after a year you'll look back and you will have thought you could do too much. But he says in 10 years, and I just talked to another friend recently that talked about the neat thing about planting a church is, even if 20 years from now, if all of you guys are gone, there's a good chance that there's still a church here and that God is still moving in people's lives. And so we started the church about a year ago. A year and a half ago, this is what we looked like. That's our hospitality leader, Julie. Is Julie in here yet? You guys, a lot of you met her on the way in. This was her a year and a half ago testing our coffee maker to find out how it worked. So a year and a half ago, we bought this coffee maker, a big Bunn coffee maker, and we heard it was a great one, and we had no idea what we were doing, so we had to load up some filters and try it. So there were 8 of us, there were a couple of us in a room trying to make coffee. Before our first practice service, Carl and I went to Sam's, and we bought a bunch of hospitality stuff. We bought those mats for the nursery. You know, I mean, we're just taking one step in the marathon, one little plug, one little step in the right direction. Then a bunch of us got together, we loaded up some bags, we started going door to door, knocking on doors, giving people gifts, and starting putting up lawn signs. That's where we were at about a year and a half ago. A year ago, we went for the big launch. And the big launch, you do a massive mailing, and big launch churches statistically have about a 50% chance. There's Julie, our hospitality girl. Thank you, Julie. We were just talking about you while you were gone. Statistically, if you do a big launch, you have about a 50% chance of survival. If you raise the funds, you raise the team, and you do it, that's the statistics. Is 50% of churches that do a big launch don't survive 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years from then, they're gone. There's another method that's kind of like the home cell group method, where you just put a few people at a home and you have a Bible study and you try to multiply that. 90% of those don't exist 3 to 5 years later. But here's why today is such a big deal. Is because statistically, if you make it to the 1 year mark, your chances of survival become 90%. 90% of churches that make it to the 1 year mark are still alive 3 to 5 years later. So this is a big landmark occasion for us. This shows that something's going to happen and something is happening. Last January, these were our statistics. If you had come here January 1st of last year, you would have seen a church of about 67 people. That's what we averaged from September until January of last year. We did a big radio campaign in January, and that number since then through today has been 104 people. So we've seen 64.4% growth, something like that, since January of this year. So things are happening. Now here's another interesting thing is that 100 mark of 100 people, that's the line they say is the line where a church becomes self-sustaining. That's the line where you can wean off of financial support from other ministers and other people, and the church starts to finance itself, which is a wonderful line to be at. And most churches, statistically, even the ones that survive, don't reach that number for about 4 years. We reached it in about 6 months. In 6 months, we were financially self-sustaining. It's just absolutely awesome. And we'll talk about that as we go on. But we are a church that wants to help people become followers of Jesus. That's our mission statement. We help people become followers of Jesus. And we do that through a fourfold ministry. And I'm going to talk to you about those four concepts, the four pillars of our church, and what we've done with those concepts since we've launched. And the first is humanitarian service. You know, the Pope recently made headlines because he thinks that American churches should lose their tax-exempt status if they don't do something substantial to help the poor. And he was very public about it. And of course, he caught a lot of flack, and different political views attacked him in different ways. And I don't necessarily agree they should lose their tax-exempt status. I do believe spiritual good is legitimate, real good. But I do think a church that isn't actively invested in the poor, actively invested in the needy, is completely missing out on what the New Testament teaches. I think we are supposed to help people who can't help themselves. And we're going to do that. And that, I would say that's the pillar we've been most successful at so far. So I'm just going to talk, and it's going to kind of sound like bragging on our church, and I'm okay with that. I want you guys to see that you're a part of something big, something cool that's happening. These are some of the ministries we've supported financially every month. In the top left is Abby Short, Sycamore Ministries, and she ministers to orphans all throughout Southeast Asia. So whether it's China or India, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar. She's involved with an organization right now called Wings International that is reaching out to orphanages, supplying them and helping them. That's somebody we support. Convoy of Hope, which you see up on the top right, they are a disaster relief organization. They move in when bad things happen, like the earthquake in Nepal. They move in with supplies. They move in with tarps. They move in with food, and we help fund them monthly. Bottom left, we fund an organization called Weep for Southern Sudan. It's an organization that empowers Southern Sudanese women to get an education. So they give them scholarships, they bring them over here to the West, to Canada or America, they get them through school, and they send them back to educate their families and their community. Bottom right, this is Jay Bean, a good personal friend of mine. He runs a ministry called Shine in the Dark Ministries in inner city Memphis. And what he does is he creates a home for kids that don't have a home. There's all kinds of kids out there that they just roam the streets. They've got one parent, and that parent is addicted to drugs, and it's just a terrible home life. So he provides a home for them. He also does things, and we'll do this one weekend. We'll go up there with him. He loads a school bus filled with leftovers from thrift stores and takes them to the projects and dumps them out on basketball courts and says, come and get it. And just supplies the needs of the local community. So that's one of the organizations that we support every month. We sent Liz Woods, our children's minister, to Nepal immediately after the earthquake this year, and they packed up suitcase after suitcase with tarps and peanut butter and all kinds of things that people needed. And they went over there and they helped dig out rubble, and they helped the need over there. The West Louisville Boys and Girls Choir, we had them here just a few weeks ago. We sponsored one of their kids for $500, and that allows them to be involved in this choir that tours the world. They played for the Prince of England when he was here just recently, but they get scholarships to go on to college. These are inner city kids that could not afford college, and we're helping fund them make it to college. We helped install a well in Honduras. Between some personal giving and between the church giving, we gave $900 to that project, and they needed $6,000 to get it done, and they got it done like that. They have a good, clean, running well system there now, and a huge part of that was you guys' giving. Project Rescue, bottom right, is an organization that reaches out to victims of human trafficking. We gave $1,000 to them just a few months ago. I'm going to keep going. And isn't it cool that we can keep going? Top left, Peru. These guys minister to orphans in Peru and give them an education, give them uniforms. We fund them monthly. And we've given about $1,000 to them in the last few months. We've done benevolence ministries up in the top right-hand corner. People come in and they say, I can't get my bills paid. We've helped them pay their bills. That's something we do. We helped pay for it. We gave $500 towards a van down in the South Alabama or Arkansas, I don't remember, to get their van done. We've also started what's called Lightline Ministries. Is Cindy Burfield in here? I didn't see Siri today. Is Siri here this morning? I don't see Siri. But these guys have substantially contributed to getting this thing started, and it is a ministry for lay people to listen and help those in crisis. So if you lose your job, or someone close to you betrays you, or something awful happens in your life, a child dies, you develop a terminal illness, and you just want someone to talk to, this is the ministry we're developing for that to happen. They train 20 people in their first session on basically sacred listening. How do you just listen to someone? How do you provide a presence for them to talk to? And they're beginning to advance that training so that these people will be trained to be good, solid listeners and to show compassion in times of need. And so, Cindy, thank you for all your contributions to that. It's going to be a big-time ministry. It's a ministry a church of 100 has no business having. We just don't. But these guys, when I say they contributed, I mean big money to make this happen, and big time. So thank you guys. We've done service projects. We went to Camp Crestwood, just over in Crestwood, Kentucky, and we tore down fences and gutted a whole area that they needed gutted. They serve kids every year for Christian camps. Top right, we serve Teen Challenge. They had one of their graduations for girls who are coming off of drug addictions. They've been clean for a year, and they get to go through graduation. We provided the meal, and Eleanor Cooper, who I see right back here, quilted 2 very beautiful quilts for these ladies. Pat Wright and Trades of Hope gave gifts to them. So we were just able to lavish love on these girls. And these girls started using cocaine at like 12 years old, some of them. And so it was just a really neat ministry. Bottom left, I see Bill DeGuiger there packing bags. We went over to Dare to Care, which is a food pantry here that distributes not food, that'd be something completely different. And that's a ministry we want nothing to be involved with. That distributes food to the needy here in town. And we just packed bags and loaded crates. And then just a few weeks ago, we went out to Cindy's house. She has a farm-ish home down south of Louisville. And for those of you who don't know, she lost her husband about 1.5 years ago. And the Bible makes it very clear that when there are widows in the church, that you take care of them. And so as a church, we went to her home and we did all kinds of work around that place. And I think it was a real blessing to her. And these are the notes that I took at our recent meeting of our Daylight Cares team. We want to make a real difference. And so we've come up with this list of stuff we want to be involved with. And there's all kinds of names on there. Now, I hesitate to say this. At the bottom of this sheet, you're going to see something that looks like Lust Sheep. That's my handwriting. It's Lost Sheep. But I didn't remember what we had talked about, so I stared at this page going, what in the world is that? Lust Sheep. Another ministry you want absolutely nothing to do with. We have done a long series here called Help. It was a sermon series. And you can check that out online. Go to daylightchurch.com and you can watch that whole thing. And it's all about how do we move from talking about changing the world to actually making a difference. And we're going to be a church that does that. We're going to be a church that actually makes a difference. Our second pillar is apologetics and study. I grew up from a background where I had boatloads of questions and no good answers. I was very confused, very skeptical, very angry, hearing nothing good from people from an intellectual perspective. And I don't want Daylight to be a church like that. At Daylight, I want you to be able to ask the hard questions and get good answers. It doesn't mean that you'll be able to prove your faith. I don't think that's possible. But I think what it can do is undergird your faith in an intellectual way to where, in my opinion, faith makes sense. I would even go so far as to say faith makes the most logical sense once you've uncovered all the evidence. And we're going to explore that stuff. We did a whole series called Can You Have a Brain and Be a Christian? I think it's a 9 or 10-part series. Looks like it was an 8-part series. These are some of the topics that we talked about. Jesus is a myth or a legend. We talked about biology and creation, cosmology, God and suffering, truth and relativism. We're not afraid of these questions. I'm not afraid of these questions. In fact, at any time, you can text in questions@daylightchurch.com and I'll get back with you. Anything you want to talk about, I'm more than happy to talk about. We did a small group on Letters from a Skeptic by Dr. Gregory Boyd. It's a back and forth dialogue between a skeptic and a Christian. And we talked about the hard questions. We also did a small group called Free for All, where you can come in and I led that group and you can ask anything. Nothing was off the table. Doesn't mean I'm going to answer every single question, but you're allowed to ask. And we did. We asked some very tough questions and we talked about them. And in fact, in our next Point of Light semester, we're doing this again. And so we want to we want to undergird the intellectual part of faith. Jesus said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And we're not afraid of the intellectual side of faith. Worship and devotion. We want you to be personally invested in your relationship with God. We don't want it to be just something you come in here and be a part of this or a part of what I'm saying or a part of what the music team is doing every week. We want you to be personally connected with God, and we want to move in that direction. Right now, currently, we're doing a series here. This is a break in that series. It's called A Celebration of Discipline. It explores things like fasting and prayer and meditation and study and all the things that we think you need to know to cultivate your own personal relationship with God. We've had all kinds of small group studies. We did one on the crime of living cautiously, practicing the presence of Jesus. We did the 7 experiment, which is it's a study in excess, how to eliminate excess from your life. And we've done all of these in 1 year. Different groups meeting at different locations. 7 Pillars of Health. Sydney Ansel did Brave. It's the honest questions that women ask. We've had prayer groups. We've had walking groups. And it's been super exciting, some of the groups we've had. And we have another semester coming right up. And we can't talk about worship and devotion without bragging on this team a little bit. Now, when I say we have no business having the Lightline ministry in our church, I can say that doubly for the music team that we have currently. Kaylee Benson, where are you? Kaylee was our music leader at the very beginning of Daylight, and unfortunately, you guys didn't get to hear her sing. And there's a scene in the movie What About Dan that they're talking about an angel, and he says, "This corn is an angel." And for what? Okay, nobody else gets that but Andrew. But this corn is an angel. But for whatever reason, sorry, Kaylee, but I thought of that quote thinking about Kaylee singing today, because the first few times that I heard her sing, I remember the very first time we set up, because I hadn't heard her sing in a long time. I didn't know how good it was going to be, but I knew she was the only thing we had, so we thought, okay, we'll roll with it. And we set up in our garage one day. We set up this sound system in our garage with her and a keyboard, and she started singing with Katie Gagel as backup. And I remember just going, yes, because I started crying. I mean, it was just so powerful. And you saw her, she plays the djembe up here, and she's like, is it Phil Collins that plays the drums and leads? She can do that. She can sing from the djembe, which is a really extraordinary talent. But she carried us for a long while and then got pregnant. And it was awesome. So Kaylee, thank you for the foundation you laid. Really, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But back then, every week it was a scramble. Who's going to play the keyboard? Do we have a guitarist this week? Basically, we had Kaylee and a keyboard and a mic, and then we weren't quite sure what was going to happen after that. But it was still really good, and God was doing things. Well, anyway, when she got pregnant, I knew she needed to be replaced because she was going to miss a couple months or 3 months, and who knows how much more. And so I started calling friends from all over the region, over in Louisville, Southern Illinois, I'm not Louisville, Murray, Southern Illinois, all over the place, saying, hey, will you fill in for us? Can we put you on a rotation? Well, thankfully, about that time, Andrew Lutz showed up. And Andrew had heard about Daylight from about 6 different independent sources, completely unrelated to one another. And because he kept hearing about it, he was at Ramsey's Cafe on the World eating dinner one day, or lunch, and was talking about Greg Boyd, the guy we just talked about a few minutes ago. And my sister Abby, who was a server there, overheard him talking about it and said, you like Greg Boyd? My brother loves Greg Boyd. And she said, I go to Daylight Church. He said, Daylight Church? I keep hearing about Daylight Church everywhere. So he decided he needed to come and check this thing out. The short of it is, he'd been here about 2 or 3 weeks when he volunteered. We asked him and he volunteered to come play with the music team. He played guitar. The first time he showed up at practice, everybody came to me and said, Andrew is awesome. Chill, okay? And I overheard it because they were meeting in my basement. And even his first practice, he'd say, hey, maybe we could try this. And he'd throw in some little riff or something he was doing on the guitar. The guitar is his weakest instrument, by the way, and he's awesome at it. But he just started filling in, and he real quickly took a leadership role. And everybody saw it, that he was a natural leader where music was concerned. And so he got involved. We started asking him. We had lunch several times and ate fried pickles together, which was really beautiful. And I know, sold on fried pickles. It's a bribe, but it worked. And he got involved. And now we have this team that you see here today. He started recruiting his brother and his wife and some of these other people. And I'm going to brag on them for just a minute. Kes Lutz, who was playing guitar today, you guys might not know this, but he gets paid big bucks. And when I say big bucks, I know what you make. I've been told. And it's big money to go play guitar for another church here in town right after daylight services. How many services do you do on a Sunday morning? And Saturdays? Okay, so he's playing a whole lot of guitar for this other church. He comes and plays for us for free. We could not afford him. We could not afford him. And yet he loves this church. So he comes early on Sunday mornings and plays. His wife Chanel, now you guys heard her sing today. She starts singing and you think, where did she come from? What is she doing in this church? We're a church of 100. We have no business having a Chanel Lutz sing for us. It just blows my mind. Chris and Christy Duke are here. Where are you guys? Christy has played keyboard and sang at a church of 4,000 people. Chris toured the country in a band playing drums. And they're just amazing. And as you guys saw, again, for a church of 100, this music team is ridiculous. Chris Wilding, where's Chris Wilding? Hey, what's up, Chris? Andrew Lutz told me last week, he said, Chris Wilding is my favorite bassist I've ever played with. And he told me that in private. Again, chill, man. All these guys are going to be like, yeah, we're going to start asking for money. But he said, Chris is a good technical bassist, and he knows when to play and when to back off. And that's a skill most bassists don't have. And he does. He can play technically, but he knows when less is more. He knows when to back up. And the other singers that we have, the other musicians we have that fill in, just awesome. And so, again, if you had asked me a year ago, what would your music team look like, it never would have looked like this. These guys are absolutely awesome. Now, to show you how great Andrew is, I'm going to show you a video that he sent the team this week. He didn't know this was coming. This was just him instructing them on something we were going to do this week. Here it goes.
Hey guys, I wanted to show you an idea that I had for the second verse on King of All the Earth. So when we come out of the first chorus, it'll be, we join with angels and sing your praise. When we come out of that, we're going to go into this new kind of riff. Chris and Cass, both of you guys will be playing this. This riff is really easy. It's... And that's going during the second verse. Chris Duke, you'll be playing, while they're doing this, you'll be playing like just a straight beat. You won't be doing any kind of tom beat. So it would sound like... So that's essentially what you're going to be doing.
Now, try to convince me that isn't big time. And he had no idea that was going to be broadcast. That was him legitimately saying, this is what it's going to sound like. This is just like a memo that he sent the music team. But you can see from it what a talented guy he is. And guitar is his weakest instrument. Super talented guy. Andrew, thank you. You are helping build this church, and it's amazing. And our intention is quarterly to do what we're calling nightlight services. We've done one so far. It's just a matter of getting them scheduled, getting them planned, and making them happen. Now, we've hired Andrew part-time, very part-time. Thank you again. And he's going to start taking over some of these things. So our next one is planned for October 23rd. So just put that on your calendar, and it'll be a night of music and worship and prayer. Missions and outreach. We believe that God changes lives, and that is... My take on that is that ought to be my overwhelming desire in life, is to see lives changed. And as long as I'm the pastor of this church, we're going to be a church that believes that and thinks that way. And we want to see God invade people's lives. And so this is pretty cool, guys. We're a church of just over 100, and since we started, we've baptized 11 people. And that, to have 10% of the people that are coming to have been baptized in the last year is huge. We don't want to be a church that shows up and everybody from Southeast migrates over and everybody from Hikes Community Church migrates over and everybody from the Baptist Church down the road migrates over. That's not our goal at all. If you're from one of those churches, I've talked to you, we get it, we understand. But we want to be a church that reaches people that want nothing to do with church. We want to be a church that reaches out to people that haven't been in church or have been de-churched. And some of you have told me those stories. You were in church and it hurt, bad things happened. And that's not a reflection on every church everywhere at all. But we get that and we understand that. But we want people who a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, really didn't want much to do with church at all. And today they're coming in, and even if they're confused, even if they don't understand why it's happening, they start connecting with God. And maybe they start something fresh and new and something they didn't even think was possible. And that's the goal of Daylight Church. And so this is neat. We sent a team of 7 people to South Korea they just got back last Sunday. Again, for a church of 100 to have already accomplished that, sending a team, we want to be very careful about our short-term trips. There's all kinds of teams that go all kinds of places to do things that somebody else could do for much less money. I'm sorry to say that, but you go to a third world country and you help paint an orphanage, and it costs you $2,500 a piece to get there. You could pay local labor $2,500 and supply their families for a year to paint an orphanage. Okay? That's just the facts about short-term missions. So we want to be very, very careful about the teams we send and how we send them and where we send them. And so we want to make sure that us going there will make a legitimate difference that could not be made otherwise. And this South Korean team was that kind of team. There's a campus ministry there that is on several of the universities there in South Korea. And they wanted Americans to come and mix it up with students on campus because Americans are like rock stars over there. You show up and they love the culture, so they want to talk to you. And it's an easy way to get them to come to your studies, to come to your groups and your events. And so they went and did that. And there's a short video from the team leader that she sent, and I'll show it to you.
Hi, I'm Katie Aller, Chi Alpha missionary to South Korea. And this is the team from Daylight Church who has spent the past week here working with Chi Alpha University Ministries. It has been so exciting to see all that God has done through the team. They've done an excellent job of just connecting with everyone, having a great attitude, and all of my students have talked about how much they love them and appreciate them being here. During this past 6 months that Daylight Church has been supporting Chi Alpha Korea, we have seen so much happen. We've gone from being on one campus to being on 3 university campuses, and we've gone from having about 50 contacts with students on campus to seeing about 200 different students participate at some point in Chi Alpha events. So God is working. Please keep us in your prayers, and remember that God has a great plan for your life. Jesus bless you.
I thought the video was funny because the team obviously had to stand there like this. I thought at the end you should have gone. It was a little awkward, but it was great. Starting next year, we're going to do a series called God's Greatest Passion, and God's Greatest Passion is people, and I believe people reach people. There was a time in my life when I was so afraid of talking about Jesus in front of people that I literally threw up for 2 days in a row. And I'm going to be sharing that story and how God has changed me. So that's on the radar as far as this pillar of our ministry. We're also supporting missionaries every single month all over the world, and you'll see that list here. Southeast Asia, which we talked about earlier. There's a missionary in Spain that does street preaching, a really incredible ministry called On the Red Box you guys should check out. We have 2 missionaries in Wales. We have U.S. campuses over at Murray State and then campuses all around the Chicago area. We're supporting a missionary in Turkey, South Korea, which you just said. European countries, this is really neat. This is something we've just started investing in. David Trementosi is a missionary who's going over to Belgium to train missionaries and pastors in Europe to train other people. And he's a really brilliant intellectual guy that would be heavy. He would fit in with the Daylight vibe and how he thinks and his giving of mercy towards other people. So highly intellectual, really sharp guy, but very compassionate, very merciful. And he's going to be the guy training pastors all throughout Europe. And we're supporting him monthly. Super excited about that. We have a missionary in Israel, missionaries in Peru who you met earlier. And then we have other global missionaries. We fund a couple that goes around all over the world building orphanages and Christian schools. And then we have a couple other ministries we sponsor that distribute literature and supplies to missionaries and pastors all over the globe. And it's been... Let's go ahead actually and jump to some of the money stuff. I want to give you kind of a financial report because it'll all tie in. But we need about $9,000 a month bare bones. That's what it costs to run this thing. That doesn't include if we need extra supplies. It doesn't include a lot of the marketing or the Gaslight Festival or all those things. That's kind of our bare bones. That does allow us to give 10%, which we're highly committed to. We will always give 10%. If we can't afford to give 10%, then we've gotten below the line and we're done. Okay? We'll always give 10%. We're also dedicated to saving 10%. So we've saved 10% ever since launch, and we've got that sitting in a bank in case we do need a facility someday. In case somebody comes with a real need, we've got some money set aside. So that $9,000 includes that money. But this is what we've brought in on average over the last 3 months. $10,571.93 has been the average for the last 3 months. And if you go back to March, basically since then we've been self-sustaining. And so it's just absolutely massive. I just talked to our biggest donor because people funded this. People from elsewhere funded this whole deal. I just talked to our largest donor last week on the phone and said, man, you can stop sending money. And he can. Now, he may continue to send something. I'm hoping he will, but I've let him know we're good. and you can do what you need to from here. But because we've had external donors, and because you guys have given generously, not just 10%, but we've been able to give 18% away of your money since it began. Because we have that external funding, we've been able to do that. And so that's why we've been able to buy these vans for orphanages, why we've been able to give to Project Rescue, is because you guys are generous. And so thank you guys for that. Our mission trip next year, we're talking about going to Peru with the missionaries that you guys just met, Bill and Lena Schrader. They have some very, very good things that we can do that it is important that we come and do. And so we'll give you more information about that. This church is bigger than what you see going on in here. Thanks to Chris Booker and his work, and he's an absolutely priceless member of this team. Every week he sets up these cameras, he records, he does the audio recording, and he's got all his technical gadgets over there, and he runs everything from his iPhone because he's groovy like that. But he goes home and, what's that? Samsung, I'm sorry. How many of you checked us out and watched videos online before you ever came? That's a good percentage, Booker, and you played a huge part in that, so thank you for that. Very good about every Monday, every Tuesday at the latest, our video gets up. Since we launched, this is how many people have played our videos off the website or elsewhere. We've had 4,890 plays of our videos. If you take that out, you extrapolate that, that means 95 times a week someone is watching our videos. That means more adults out there are watching the sermons than there are adults in here every single week. And so it's big. And they're from all over the world. If you look at these, and that country list goes way, way down. You'll find in India and South Korea, and all these places Canada and Czech Republic and Germany, Russia. And so Italy, and this is funny, the Italians have loaded the videos 5 times and watched the videos 5 times, so they're committed to watch what they do. It's funny, you look at the Americans have loaded it 12,700 times and only watched it 4,500 times. So the Americans are like, I'm out of here, this isn't no good at all. Our podcast gets 44 hits a week. So if you add the podcast to the video cast, about twice the number of people in here are hearing the message out there, and they're passing it along to their friends. And so, Booker, thank you for that, and we're excited about it. I'll buy you breakfast sometime soon. Our kids' ministry continues to grow. Last week they did a blanket fort week. Liz has become very creative about some of the things she's doing. We've got some really neat things coming up that we'll talk to you about. We're talking about once quarterly doing a date night for parents. And so parents come and drop their kids off and go on a date night, and we give them a great special event. We're talking about having things that they send you via email, send parents via email every week that they can discuss with their kids. And I know there's some parents that say we don't want homework, but there's other parents who do, so we're talking about doing that. This is the most exciting announcement on the whole thing. We bought out a theater for the new Star Wars movie. And it launches on December 18th. We're showing at midnight December 17th. And you know there's all kinds of geeks that will stand in line for 2 days to be the first one in the theater. We get to be the one in front of the geeks. And so it's pretty big time. We'll just leave it up and you can worship your idol, yes. And so there will be more details coming up about that. This is the handout that we did at the Gaslight Festival this weekend, where Darth Vader says, I find your lack of church attendance disturbing. We're talking about doing a People of Daylight book as a gift for you guys this time next year. Is Aaron Brent in here with us yet? He's not here today. Aaron Brent is a very, very talented artist and photographer, and we're talking about profiling 10 or 20 of you and creating a book. So he would do a photo shoot with you, and we're just going to talk about who you are, and that's going to be something available to guests and available to you guys as a gift. It will be well done. He's going to do a good job of it, but it's just something coming up on our radar. Our Points of Light will kick off again in the middle of October. Right now, we have a hiking group. I'm going to do another free-for-all. Joseph Bond, are you in here? Where's Joseph? Joseph has experienced years and years of drug addiction and just overall addiction in his life, and has been free for some time now. 5 years, something like that, 3 to 5 years. And he is going to lead a group called Freedom, and it's going to be for people who have life-controlling problems or know people with life-controlling problems. And you want to know, is there a way out? How do we do that? You're going to learn from a guy who's been there and has conquered it and seen it beaten. Linda Lutz is here, and Linda Lutz is going to do a line dancing class for us. So if you're looking forward to just getting together and doing some dancing and cutting a rug, she's the one you're going to want to talk to. So many stories. I'm going to tell two quick stories. Some of you have heard the first story, and maybe you've heard it multiple times, but it's worth telling again, because from the very beginning, and this is where we're at, we want to see God move. We want to see God touch people's lives. We want to see God touch people who maybe a year ago had no interest in God having anything to do with them. And so we've prayed that we'll do what we can do, and God will do what only He can do. That's been our prayer from the very beginning. We'll work hard. We'll take the steps in the marathon, but He has to show up. And so, Bridget, I hope I don't make you cry here, but I might. This is Bridget's son, Chris, and his fiancée, Kendra. And they died just about a year and a half ago in a motorcycle accident here. 18 months last week. Died in a motorcycle accident. And when we launched, Bridget contacted me before launch, and she described herself in the email as a grieving mama. She said, I just, basically life stinks, and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, come meet us. We'd love to spend some time with you. And so she came. She came to that first Sunday a year ago. 1 year ago tomorrow. 1 year ago, she came. And so I told her story to the people that showed up. After the service, a family approached me and said, and they had obviously been crying, and they had sat in the back row of the theater. We were in a smaller theater then. Came up, they had obviously been crying, and they introduced themselves, and they were Kendra's family. And they just happened to be in that service that day. And so that to me was a little confirmation that God, of 1 million people in the Louisville area, one little tiny theater, those 6 showed up, right? Well, fast forward a few months, and I'm at the Thunder over Louisville downtown. There's 800,000 people there. And I took a stack of invitations about this big, and I was passing out invitations, and it was shoulder to shoulder, so I'm passing them out like this as people come by, just trying to put them in people's hands. And after 45 minutes of doing that, I looked around, and there were all these invitations all over the ground everywhere. And I'm used to that. I've done all kinds of stuff like that, but it's always discouraging. And I had a stack, and my stack had shrunk from that to about that. And I was about ready to pack it in when I handed a card to this guy sitting in the front row right there. And he said, "What's this?" I said, "Well, it's an invitation to a new church in town." And I said, "It's a church for not-so-churchy people." He said, "What's your take on homosexuality?" I said, "Well, I think it's a really complicated issue, and I said, I think it's an issue that needs to be handled with each person as an individual. I think it's challenging and difficult." He said, "Yeah, that's what I think too." He said, "But this street preacher right down the road was calling everybody queers," and he said, "That guy made me mad." And so when he came to me, he was steaming. He was pretty angry. He and his girlfriend were there. And they told me their story about how they had both been told by separate doctors at different times that both of them were unable to have children. But just a few weeks before that, they had had their first child together. And he was taking that as some kind of sign that God was doing something in his life, or that God was active. And so when he met me, he was already kind of just a little bit primed angry, and then primed in another way. And we had a really nice conversation that day. And I said, "Man, you should come check us out." I said, "But before you do that," I said, "get online and watch a couple of our videos." I said, "Check it out and see if it's for you. And if it's not, let me know, and I'll try to find you a church that you feel like you could find a good place." He emails me 2 Saturdays after that. He says, "Man, I just watched your launch service from last year." He said, "I cried through the whole thing because I was Chris's best friend." So of all the people at Gaslight Festival, 800,000 people, the only guy that stops and talks to me is the guy that when he gets online watches, and we're talking about his best friend at the service. The one video of all our 35 videos that were up that he chose to watch that day. So he shows up at church the next day, Sunday. He tells me, he says, "Man, there's bad blood between Bridget and I." He said, we can't have this. And so he shows up, and he takes me by the arm, and he takes me over to Bridget. He says, "You need to be here for this." He says, "Bridget, we can't live like this anymore." And he said, "I don't know if it's God or it's Chris or whoever." He said, but we've got to make amends here. And the short of it is, ever since then, this is what you see, is them sitting together in church, them communicating, them loving each other. And so God did a reconciliation process. Now, to me, what are the odds? I mean, when we pray, we'll do what we can do, God, you do what you can do. That's God. That's God doing what he can do that I couldn't possibly do, that you couldn't possibly do. One more quick story. I've started praying before services for specific things. It's been really cool. I'll pray that one of you guys will do a specific thing when you come in and you do it. It's so wild. Ooh, the puppet master. But I'm praying very specifically when we have services. And a few weeks ago I'm praying, and I always pretend God says to me, okay, H, what do you want? And a couple months ago probably, God said to me, what do you want? And I said, I want Peter McClellan to sign up to get baptized today. That was my prayer that day. And that same day, I preached, I talked about following Jesus, and I don't do this every week, but that week I said, if you're here and you want to become a follower of Jesus. Now, Peter had wanted nothing to do with God 9 months ago. He would tell you that himself. It's been a really neat story involving Matt Chalmers and David Jeanette and some of the other people in the church, how Peter and his wife Brooke, how he even ended up here is a really neat story. But that day I said, if you want to become a follower of Jesus, I wasn't trying to embarrass each other. I said, I just want you to raise your hand so I can pray for you. And Peter, and everybody was standing, and Peter stands up like this and he goes. And he looked me right in the eye and raised a fist. And I thought, yeah. And he comes to me after the service, and the first thing he says to me, he says, man, I need to get wet this week. And so my prayer that day was that Peter McClellan, who wanted absolutely nothing to do with God a year ago, would say, I want to get baptized. And that day, God moved with him and in relationship with him, and he said, yeah. And I still, I taught on fasting a couple weeks ago. This week I got a text from Peter that said, my breath really stinks. That was all it said. Because, and I don't want to embarrass him, he did a 3-day water fast this week. A guy who wanted absolutely nothing to do with God a year ago is deciding, I want to be disciplined. I want to chase after God. I want to find God. I want to love him. I want to serve him. And he's making sacrifices. And his wife Brooke approached me right after his baptism, which here's a picture of him in all his very white glory. I'm going to get that off of there. Some of the ladies, you gotta watch them. But God's doing neat stuff. And here, I'm going to close with a couple thoughts. I'm excited about how this church is becoming a family. I love you guys. I mean, there are people that have been here, and I've only known you for 6 months, and you are incredibly dear to me. And I feel as close to you as I've ever felt to anybody in my entire life. I don't know how you grow a church and keep it a family, but we're going to do the best we can. You can't do it forever. You got to create little families, and eventually we'll have to start figuring that kind of stuff out. But for right now, you guys feel like my family, and I love you. So thank you. Again, they said you'll overestimate what you can do in a year, and you'll underestimate what you can do in 10. I would have never dreamed we'd be where we are. The first part is wrong. If you had told me a year ago that this is where we would be, I would have had a hard time believing you. And so when I think about the future and where we're going, they say if you want to have a church of 500, you got to start acting like a church of 500. I feel like that's where we're at. I feel like we're doing things that churches of 200 and 300 and 400 people start to think about doing. I think Daylight is going to grow. And the exciting thing about that is the more Daylight grows, the more people like John Clark show up and God touches their lives. The more people like Peter McClellan show up and God changes them. And there's a lot of you that I know your stories, and I know what's going on in your life, and I know that this has been really meaningful to you. And so as we grow, we're going to see God give meaning and purpose to people's lives. This has been my life verse for as long as I can remember. It wasn't written to me, but I still take it and I claim it. It says, look among the nations and be utterly amazed, for I am going to do a work in your days that you would not believe even if it were told to you. I believe that's what's going to happen at Daylight Church. I believe that as we continue to grow and we continue to expand and we continue to love God and just take that one next marathon step and the one step forward, that things are going to happen that we wouldn't believe even if God prepared us for them.